Today we're going to be talking a little bit about trailer brake controllers. Now there's a lot of people that have looked at my video on installing one of these on your 18 F150 and they found out that the ones that they bought don't work. Now between that and then looking at the Ford forums where people are actually saying when they go through the steps to install them, they don't work, they find out that the part that they bought is potentially counterfeit or just looks like a Ford controller. So what we're going to do is we're going to compare a few different units. And I've actually purchased 3 different ones that we're going to look at. Now, one of the interesting things is when you look at them, they all look about the same. There are subtle differences about them, and we'll definitely get into that and we'll look at what the differences are. But we're going to take each one of these, we're going to look at it component by component. We're going to weigh all the parts, and then we're going to look at the electronics in it to see which one is actually Ford versus is one of them a knockoff. So we're going to go through and we're going to look at each different one. This one right here in the center, I bought from Ford themselves. So this was an OEM part. I know this is a good part. This is the one that I bought and I installed in my truck. This one here is actually marked Ford as well. I bought it from eBay and I only paid $50 for it. Now, looking at this unit here, this unit that I bought OEM from Ford cost me over $200. We're going to look at the difference between them and look to see if it's an actual Ford or if it's a knockoff, allegedly. And then this one is a separate one that I bought off a different site that has no branding on it, but it looks exactly like the Ford controller. It looks like both of them. But when I look at the installs, some of the people that have posted pictures shown some of these with burn marks in them and issues on them. This was $100, so twice as much as that Ford, maybe not OEM controller. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at the difference between these. Now, both of the Ford ones, or the one I got off Tasca plus the one I got off eBay, are labeled actual Ford parts. And we'll take a look at the packaging they came in a second. But when I look at the difference between them, they look in general the same, but there's slight nuanced differences, whether we're talking about the plastics, the labels, even the weight. Now let's take a look at the one that I bought off eBay. Now for this unit, the seller claims it's a genuine Ford product. They have the part number, they say OEM all over it. And when you get down to the bottom, you look at it, everything matches up. You wouldn't question it at all. The only thing that you potentially question is the price of it. Now where I actually found this controller was off the F150 forums. Someone bought one and they were complaining that they couldn't get it working and they were having a lot of issues with it. So decided to purchase one myself. Now when you look at the reviews on it, it got 4.8 stars. So you think, wow, that's great, it's gonna work. But when you dig a little bit deeper in the reviews, you can see they're using the part number that matches the ones from the other Ford sellers. It gets lumped in with those reviews. Now the person that purchased it, bought it, they brought it to Ford to try to get it working. They couldn't get it working, so they had to buy an OEM one from Ford, and they got that one working. And that's a common story you hear on the forums. Now for the last one, it looks exactly like the Ford ones. Maybe a little bit different in the plastic, but we're gonna go ahead and look at what those nuances, what those differences are. So first, let's go ahead, let's take a look at the outside, see what's different, let's weigh them, and then we're gonna go ahead and take them apart. Now before we start taking these apart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. Doing a video like this is pretty expensive. I had to buy all these parts myself, so you're figuring about $400 to $450. Get them shipped here, and then we're gonna take them apart so they're not gonna work anymore. So if you do me a favor, go ahead and like this video so that it gets shared. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Let's go ahead, let's start taking it apart. So this is the Ford one. This is the other Ford one. And this is the non-Ford one, but looks like a Ford one. Now the first thing I want to do before I take these apart is actually weigh them to take a look and see what the difference is. Because when you expect to get a part from Ford, if you're buying the same part number, the same revision, both of them are revision A, you'd expect them to be around the same weight. So I have this set up. We're gonna go ahead and weigh each one. So this is the Ford one, the one that I bought from Tasca. It weighs 5.5 ounces. This is the allegedly not Ford one, 4.2 ounces, so significantly lighter. And then this is the non-Ford one, 3.7 ounces, so they kind of go up in weight. Now, seeing all this data, I think we're gonna find something very interesting when we finally open these up. Now, the Ford one here is made in Mexico. This Ford one here, I guess, is made in China, according to this Ford parts bag that it came in. And when I look at this Ford parts bag, I think the first thing that kind of keys me in that there might be an issue is, one, that's the part number that matches both of these. It says name module, okay, whatever. But what I'm looking at where I assume is supposed to be where a hologram symbol is, right there, it kind of looks like someone just scanned it. So I don't know. I'm assuming that someone took this, scanned it, and then made a sticker out of it. But it kind of has me thinking that, something to look into here. And this one, I have no idea where it's made. So let's go ahead and compare this one from Ford in Mexico to this one that was made in China. And we're gonna take a look at what the differences are on the outside. All right, let's go ahead and get this in a frame and take a look at it. So we're gonna compare the two supposed Ford ones. Now, you can see that when we look at the symbols that are on them, the same part number is 2C006, 2C006. One is pad printed on, while the other one is etched on. This one is actually in the mold. You can tell this one's in the mold. It's kind of like an insert, so they put it in there. If they needed to change the part number, they could change the part number by removing that little plate out. And on the back, you can see both say DC9BD, but one is scribed in while other is pad printed in. Now, when I look at the connectors, all the connector pins are populated. They look about the same, so there's not much of a difference there. You can definitely tell that looking at the back of these connectors that they are different designs just by what are the pins that push it out one in the mold. So you can see these ones have little divots there where this one does not. So they're not purchasing the same part. So with experience in manufacturing, I know that if a manufacturer is building this one in Mexico, they're building this one in China, they would most likely source the parts locally or have them made. So if they're buying this part off the shelf, they buy from a local vendor versus this one, unless they're designing it themselves and designing the molds themselves, which I don't know if they are. So that's one thing that's different, but could be. The pad printing and on the outside is more questionable because, if one's printed on it, there's no reason that this one couldn't be made by the same manufacturer as this one versus the Ford one. Now, one of the other things I want to compare on these is the different screws that are being used. So I look at the OEM Ford one, and it's actually using Torx on these screws. When I look at the one that's made in China, it's a Phillips head. And if I look at this one over here, it is also a Phillips head. So it's really interesting to see this one using Torx on the outside, this one using Phillips head, and this one using Phillips heads, when these two are supposed to be the same design. Now looking at these, I don't see too much difference in the design of them. They're all similar. I did notice that when we look at kind of the gates and what are different on this one, on the Ford one versus the other one, you can see that, they probably put the plastic in right here and then cut that off. But when I compare it to the non-Ford one, doesn't look like it's there, or they just really polished it well. We'll be able to see when we finally get inside them. So this is the part I bought from Tasca. This is the part I bought from eBay. And you can clearly see that looking at these, that this is a different font. So this plus is definitely a lot thicker than the one down here. And the same thing with this minus. This one's nice and crisp. This one's a lot bigger and fuzzier. So you're starting to see more and more of the differences between the two. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and take this Ford one apart first. Now it uses an ultra small hex, or Torx, unlike the other ones. So we're gonna take this apart. Now, while I would expect to see some differences between the same part numbers, I don't expect to see different screws. Something like this is usually what's called out on the drawing for the part between manufacturers. All right, so with that out, this is probably come loose. So we're gonna compare Ford 1 versus Ford 2 first. Okay, Ford 1 versus Ford 2, everything's loose. Should be able to just push it out and take a look. Yeah, so I think starting to see some big differences between them. Now, both of these are Fords. So this is the knockoff, this is the Ford OEM. And one of the first things that you're noticing is, this board is significantly more populated than this board. And that's probably where a lot of that extra weight is coming from. Now we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna do a little bit of a comparison, but I think it's very clear on what the differences are between these. You know, for the fun of it, so I want to make sure I get these separated. I'm going to take apart this one here, which is the non-Ford branded one. And we're going to take a look at what's inside of it. I want to see if it's closer to the Ford one or if it's closer to this one, which I'm going to say is probably not Ford now. So here's the first trailer brake controller. That's the Ford one that I bought from Tasca Parts that we know is OEM. Here's the one that I bought that was mislabeled by the person on eBay that said it was an OEM controller. And then last but not least, here's a different brand unit that I bought offline, and you can see not many components on it at all. All right, so looking at all these boards, there are some very, very significant differences between each one of them. And, you know, I can probably say that the one that was labeled Ford that I got off eBay is most likely not a Ford part. The reason why I'm saying that is because it's a completely different design inside. The outside is made to look like a Ford part, but when you get inside, it's completely different. Now, it's the same part number, it's the same revision. So while you could see some small changes of manufacturers, you know, swapping out a chip here or there, the boards are completely different. I'm actually kind of shocked at how much less hardware they're using to try to run the same thing. So there's big differences between all three of these. Now, the first and major thing that I'm noticing is kind of the heat sinking. So when we look at the Ford unit, you know, it has, which I'm thinking are transistors. I haven't taken it apart. It has these transistors, which are on a massive, which I'm assuming is an aluminum heat sink that's connected to this board. And you can see that blue thermal pad that's on there. Now, with that blue thermal pad that's on there, it's helping dissipate the heat so that the chip doesn't get too hot and it doesn't cause a fire or any burning, which I think, as we've seen in some of the pictures, we've seen issues with other brands having that issue. Now, I find it really interesting on the design that's the allegedly not a Ford one. It has a giant red wire jumping power from one location to the other. You usually don't do that on the board. When we look at the one that's the off-branded one, so the non-Ford branded one, it doesn't have a backplane to it. It doesn't have what I'm thinking are the transistors heat sinked like the other ones. Actually, looking at this one, there is no heat sinks at all on it. So if you're trying to do the same amount of work with it and you're not running heat sinks, I can see how parts would overheat and cause issues. It's very clear that there is a difference there. All right, so those are these three units that I bought offline. One from Tasca Ford, the $50 Ford one, that's potentially not an actual Ford one, and then the $100 one that I bought that was not branded Ford. You know, I don't have any proof that the one in the center, the one that we were talking about, the $50 one, isn't actually made by Ford because I can't go visit the factory. But when you look at everything and how it comes together, they're the same part numbers, the same revisions, and they're completely different designs. I have a hard time believing that that unit actually came from Ford. With that, when you go make a decision on which trailer brake controller you want for your truck, take a look at this video, make a decision based on it. You know, for me, I'm not choosing based on price, I'm choosing based on quality. And I think by taking these apart and looking through the number of components in them, you can see there are significant differences there. So thanks for tuning in to Smackey's Garage this week. I'll see you next time.